It has been a rough year for the workforce, particularly those 400,000 some tech workers that have been laid off. But in comes fractional talent and temporary teams. How can we make sense of these and more in the future of work? That's why my guest this week is Sneha Saigal. Sneha is the co-founder and CEO of Geeks and Experts, a platform for startups and scale-ups to hire fractional PR talent on a contract basis. Sounds good. Sneha has over a decade of experience working in early stage and VC-backed companies across industries from food tech to nonprofits. She is also a top writer on Medium, and we'll be talking about one of her recent posts later in the show. I can't wait for this conversation. But first, welcome to this week's episode of Make Sense, a video podcast that simplifies complex issues at the intersection of tech and people. So whether you're totally hyped on artificial intelligence and ready for the robot takeover, or you want to crawl into a cave after deleting all of your social media accounts, I feel you. I'm here with my guests to help make sense of what's going on so you can design yourself into the future. My name is Lindsay. I'm a product market fit strategist, innovation consultant, and venture fundraising advisor. If you're new here, subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So let's make sense of fractional talent in the workforce. Sneha, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much, Lindsay. It's so great to be here. I must say, it's kind of like a full circle moment from when I started following your content a year ago almost, in terms of customer discovery and go to market and product market fit. So it's an exciting moment for me to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad and I'm so happy that my content helped you. So that's what it's there for. If anyone is watching this on YouTube, just go to the playlist. You'll see playlists of marketing, customer research, product and prototype, all about accelerators, fundraising, and etc. So let's start with our first segment. Crystal ball, what does the future hold? So this is where I call out interesting predictions for this year that other experts made. And my guests, who are experts in of themselves, tell us their hot take. So I'm going to rapid fire some headlines and say, I want you to say, yes, I want that to happen, or no, please no. And if you know anything about it, just give us a little extra information, all right?
Absolutely. Sounds fun. Let's do it.
Sounds great. Okay, so first headline, Age of the Tech CEO Hero will come to an end. I love giving this one to female founders. So CEOs like Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Travis from Uber, Adam from WeWork. This illusion that tech companies will save us has shattered. What do you think?
Yes, yes, yes. Double thumbs up to that one. It's definitely something that I hope is in the works and is happening, and we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg right now. But that being said, I think it's a long haul till those onion layers keep getting unpeeled and unpeeled there. But it's definitely a trend that is more and more visible. It's happening on the founder side, on the fundraising side. So yeah, I'll here for it.
Yeah, I always like to ask female founders this one because I want to ask, like, how does the glorification of startup CEOs help or hurt you?
Yes, that's a great, great, great one. And I think it's something that I kind of learned organically during being a founder myself. And let's add to that being a BIPOC founder, being an immigrant founder. Those are just challenges that kind of get added on. I think of it like being a founder and then being a founder on steroids. So there's different, kind of energies attached to it. But yeah, for sure, I think the glorification is something that can really work on your mental resilience, and at the end of the day it is so much about your mindset. So I think that glorification does some harm to those who think that when you're starting out, that is the next milestone you need to go to, whereas that's not really. That's just a moving goalpost. So I think that's something you have to tread carefully, and I'm still doing it as I go. I'm working on that, not to let that shiny object distract you, to not let those false signals kind of come in your way.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about those false signals in our third segment, just to tease that you all should stay on for this. So let's switch headlines. Hybrid work here to stay. So the focus on when just as much as where we work, just the trends around breaking free from the 9 to 5. Yay, nay?
Definitely. Yay. Definitely yay for that. From multiple efficiency standpoints, just reducing overhead standpoint. Yes, definitely it's a trend that, of course, COVID escalated. Technology made that equalizer for us, but it's here to stay.
100%. I think it's here to stay too. Even though there was a huge fuss over the summer and some CEOs demanded people go back into the office and the workers resisted. So, next one, shorter work weeks will become more prevalent. So, you will see a shift to shorter work weeks with this concept being fully realized and accepted in the next maybe 2 to 3 years. Yay or nay?
Yes, I think it's already happening, and I think it's a trend that it's not even a trend anymore. I think that future of work that we're talking about is kind of happening now in many ways. The 40-hour work week is getting reduced to the 20 or the 30-hour work week, and tying into when we talk about fractional time, that's the whole concept of fraction in fractional. And I think for sure that's something that we will see becoming more of a norm in the
Mhm.
future.
100%. 100%. I hope we see shorter work weeks. And one of my past guests said, maybe it could be in the US, it seems way far off. In Europe, in some countries, it seems much closer. But one of my past guests, Jess Pagani, she said, she'd like to see it as like a benefit that you earn with seniority within an organization. If
Hmm.
you're working full time for a company, if
Hmm.
you're a CEO, a founder, an independent contractor, creator,
Yes.
like we are, we can decide what a shorter work week looks for us. We have a lot more flexibility.
For sure. And I think that's a key component of that is like you mentioned, owning your time, just having to decide how you spend it or where you're spending it. So I think more people are cognizant of that, and including companies, I think, are wanting to get more efficient rather than kind of deep dive into that workforce monitoring and things like that, which we did see didn't work in many cases as well, right?
Right. All right. So privacy for another episode. Last headline. Stan, top talent will choose to work with kind, empathetic leaders who also fuel high performance. So this says kind, caring, and high performance culture will attract the best of the best.
I love that one, and I personally think that it should have been happening long while ago because most projects fall through because of that value misalignment. We're seeing, just long-term relationships are definitely focused on that. I mean, if you don't have KPIs is one thing, but your values is something totally different. And of course, the younger workforce is very, very, they focus a lot on values. So I think if we were to work, if we had to keep teams young, if we have to keep, things relatable, yes, that is the only way to go is to keep that focus on values.
Yeah, I would love to see. I think the one critique I have with this one is, kindness. It's hard to kind of measure
Measure. Hmm.
and necessarily perceive. I think naturally, like a relationship between like leadership and the rest of the company, there's going to be plenty of decisions that are not
Yeah.
aligned, but I do think empathetic leadership
Hmm.
does fuel high performance because when you can approach the person that you on your team with full authenticity and understanding
Hmm.
of where they're coming from and that they are not a robot to just churn things out you know
Exactly.
empathy, I
Exactly.
definitely agree, is
I
something.
think it's a fine balance, right, between confidence and humility. It's an art to like maintain both and
Right.
come across as strong and as having an opinion, but also being open to learning. I mean, you're always grappling these two ends of the spectrum. So I think from a leader standpoint, it's definitely something that would have impact for employees. But yeah, hopefully we'll see it working out.
Yeah. So that brings us to our next segment, deep dive. So, in this segment, we get into the details about a specific topic and sometimes technology's implications for everyday people. So, today we're really talking about temporary work and fractional talent. I think you can tell us more about the type of people that are great in this role, but I think it is important for people in this audience to understand the options that are available to them if they were ever to consider leaving full-time work
Mhm.
and in hopes of getting more flexibility. So, Sneha, you're the co-founder and CEO of Geeks and Experts. You offer talent as a subscription, focusing on fractional talent in sales, branding, and marketing efforts. So, let's make sense of it, break it down. First, what does fractional mean?
Yeah, it's kind of a new word that's making it round, right? But I think there's some picking that we can do here to tear it apart. So on one hand, you have freelancers that are project based. You go on a website, you pay $50, you'll get a logo designed. On the other end, you have the full-time hiring, which is its own exhaustive process. Fractional literally stands for fraction. So it would be a subject matter expert who's working on multiple companies during the week for a fraction of their time. And that's how I like to explain it, because yeah, it kind of feels like there's overlaps with freelancers and contractors, but even contractors for the long, most part is long-term projects probably, and it's mostly with maybe one big client. What we're seeing with fractional is it's kind of broken down over multiple clients that they're working with, and these are engagements depending on the kind of projects that are lined up. So especially in the startup and scale up space, it's something that is coming up, as you mentioned right when we were opening. The number of layoffs that took place, that's a clear indication of two things: one, wanting to reduce overheads, but two, wanting to still make sure that the runway is effective for whatever goals are being met. So while we see fractional talent coming up in CFOs and executive C-suite level places, there's also other areas in which that trend is kind of rising right now.
Is fractional a new term, or is it or a new concept, or just a new term to describe something separate than a contractor, a freelancer, consultant?
Yeah, I think it's been around, but I think it's now kind of picking up its substance of what it stands for, because yes, it's not that it's completely different or it's a whole new concept. It's just getting repackaged almost in a way, for a lot of new companies that are exploring that route. Because I think a lot of traditional roles were considered to be full time. I mean, there was a no-brainer that you have a CEO, and then you have a CTO, and then you have a CFO. But I think more and more companies are now looking at those roles also being broken down, which
Yeah.
wasn't as much as you would think of outsourcing design. I mean, that's something that's been around for very long now.
I, I like this term and the normalization of it for startups and scale ups, just new businesses in general, for many reasons. Um, One, I've seen so many startups hire someone with incredible marketing experience, except that experience is from, Fortune 1000 companies where they have a
Yeah.
much bigger budget, right? So
Yeah.
startup, and I'll just say startup, but everyone know that I'm also talking about scale ups and
Hmm.
however else new businesses. But
Sure.
I've seen startups, hire someone, give them the title of CMO. They're coming from a Fortune 1000 company. They're used to big budgets, and they don't know how to adapt to be much more scrappy and
Hmm.
take on some growth hacks, which like is another term I can get into later, but they're just not as scrappy, right? And then on the flip side is that you hire someone with not a lot of experience, but give them that title just because
Yeah.
they've been at the company maybe before everyone else. I remember working at a company under a VP of product who had never done
Hmm.
any product work before that company, but she was the first employee. So the reason she was my boss and that she had that title was she got there before me, not because she actually had more experience. So I like the idea of being able to bring people on as a fractional. CMO, CPO, any of these, because one, they might not need someone full time, and two, it gives them the ability to access the appropriate talent for the stage of the
Hmm.
business that they're at.
Hmm. No, absolutely. I think you have a great point there about that sweet spot of having the industry expertise or experience and bringing that to the table. But if I'm a startup or a scale up in the seed to series A stage, what a Fortune 500 company does is very far from what I need to be doing. So
Right,
I think that's a very, very key focus, which what we're trying to do at Geeks and Experts is precisely that, to make sure that that match makes sense. Because specifically when it comes to public relations, or doing fundraising announcements or media sprints for a new feature that your product is launching, or you have an upcoming kind of event that you want to get media visibility for. A lot of these things are very specific and time bound. They require professionals who've had that industry expertise, and that they can actually implement and show in a strategic way what the next 3 to 6 months vision looks like. I think at the very high level, when it's CMO and CFOs, those ones, guests can have their own set of challenges, because it definitely needs to make sure that the person who's coming on board understands the state at which the company is,
right,
which can be a game changer for both the team, the founder, as well as the talent that's coming on board.
yeah,
So that's what we're seeing, that industry expertise is important, but you have to know what stage you're in. So it can't be entry level again, because
yeah.
like you mentioned, I mean, you need to have somebody who's been there, who's finessed those relationships in the past, who has a proven track record of some sort, and that's quantifiable, that you can actually see the kind of work that they've done in that specific domain.
Yeah. I always said in the product and design world, um, startups, one, early stage founders, I know from my own research, believe that product and design is something they can do themselves. Experts who have worked with early stage founders say it is not something that they can do themselves. So there's conflict in them not realizing that they need help in the product and design area, and sometimes even marketing. I know I talk about it a lot on this channel, but that people overlook marketing all the time,
Hmm.
and I also know that we're going to bring that up in the next segment. um, but in the product and design world, the consequences of having a UX designer that doesn't understand uh, how much time it's going to take to build their designs, right?
Yes.
The consequences of having a product manager that is so early on that they don't see
Yes.
the oncoming boulders coming their way with software developers are so huge. They're so huge to hire, talent, and that's just coming out of like a boot camp or something. It's so
Hmm.
tempting because they're cheap, but
Hmm.
the trickle down like consequences are really terrible, because most software projects can 3x over scope. So it's like
Yeah.
it's something I think about a lot in my 20 years in this career designing and in startups, is that they can't afford someone like me, but they also
Hmm.
can't afford someone that just came out of a boot camp,
Hmm.
right? And the perception is that they can afford the boot camp, but man, it's going
Yeah.
to blow up your software development budget. So,
Right. No, that's a great point, and thanks for bringing that up, because I think there's a key part over there of understanding your strengths and understanding what you're not good at, and figuring out a way to take off from there. Because you're absolutely right. I think in the early stages as a founder, um, sales is not something you can really outsource. I mean,
yeah,
very early on, it has to be founder-led sales. There has to be trial and error. You're doing so many tight experiments that you're still fine-tuning the messaging, the outreach.
100.
But if it's a product-led, kind of startup, and if you're not the technical person on it, then it's kind of murky waters there. You need to find somebody who has the wherewithal, who can at least help you take it from point A to point B. And I think that's what I think it all boils down to. I mean, when we're working with the clients, we're just very mindful of where are you right now and where do you see yourself going? Because yeah, it's not somebody that is at such an early stage that you would want to force selling any kind of fractional talent to, because it's not going to make sense for them.
Right.
But when they're further down the line and then they have the bandwidth, A, of course, budgets, B, knowing what are their internal capabilities and what are not their internal capabilities, and just looking for external talent for that, I think is a game changer. So I completely agree with you there. I think in terms of figuring out what is a good fit for where you're at changes almost every several months. You do a seed round, your needs will be very different from when you do a Series A. So you have to keep matching up with that.
Yeah. So how experienced do you have to be an interim or fractional leader?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot that weighs in actually on your previous expertise and experience. It's not, because that's everything is about trust and relationship building. I mean, at the stage when you're starting out, if this is something that you're doing for the first time, there's got to be some kind of track record. So people are going to want to see, what have you worked on before? What kind of impact did you have in other projects or other companies? Because at the end of the day, it is companies that are giving their money, as opposed to maybe going to hire somebody who's full time for them, because that's a big definition for them, that they're not getting somebody full time because they want to save those costs. So if it turns out to be somebody who's not that experienced and they can't trust, it's going to be hard for them to hand off that project to you, specifically because you're fractional. So that's why I feel trust plays such a big role here. Many people don't realize that it's not as simple as creating a portfolio and sending that. It's a little more hands-on, because you're actually working on the execution bit as well, on processes with the founder, very closely with their founding team. So yeah, you have to have that industry expertise and be like a thought leader or subject matter expert in your domain.
100%. So now that actually brings me to a question. When you say a thought leader in your domain and a industry expertise, are you talking about industry, i.e. health tech or prop tech, legal tech, fintech, all of the techs? Or are you talking about being an expert at PR?
Yeah, that's again a great one, because I think it's both the cross section of the vertical as well as the industry. And that brings me to a fun, kind of, the projects we're seeing are so specific, because in something like PR or communications, you have such niche, domains. I mean, you have travel, which is very open-ended, right up to, I have clients who are in the rodent business.
Right.
So you're tackling somebody who should have those expertise or that knowledge from that industry, but also have the skill set. So I think those are the two things that we're talking about should have an overlap, that it's you've worked in that industry, but you also have knowledge of that specific skill set that is required, whether that is press releases, whether that is pitching to journalists,
Sure.
kind of doing those PR sprints. And that's specifically PR, because that's the bread and butter that we're seeing coming up. Some of the experts that we have on board, call other platforms like the fast fashion version of what we're trying to do, which is way more sustainable, kind of bespoke way of matching talent. And it's, to your point, just making sure the stage at which you are and then the talent that you're onboarding meets those criteria of industry as well as skill set. So I would say both of those are important.
Right. So what kind of people succeed as fractional leaders?
Yeah, I think leaders who have capabilities that they have done in the past, if they've worked independently or they've worked in big organizations and are now choosing to take this path of fractional talent, I think they would find a lot of success, given they have that clarity of what exactly are they going to deliver to the client. I think being upfront about those KPIs and what success looks like is something that we do on every onboarding call. So when we're onboarding the talents, like, okay, this is the 6-month or 1-year contract that we're drawing up. What does success look like? Where do you see the company going? So I think those people who have that vision, of being able to take someone from point A to point B would find success in that. And again, I think it depends on the role as well. Like I mentioned, I think sales is something at the early stages founders would not necessarily be outsourcing because they're still figuring out how to sell. But maybe for other domains, like branding, like marketing, those are domains where we're seeing a lot of fractional talent also finding success.
I imagine as a person looking at fractional, you know, you said, a fraction of your week. So you have to be able to manage multiple projects
Hmm.
and multiple clients. You also have to be able to set boundaries, if you're only working a
For
certain amount
sure.
of hours or a certain percent of your time. It sounds like, particularly for your clients, having a strength in activation, which is that strength of moving from A to B.
Yes.
And then, I think one of the things that I also see when some people fail is
Hmm.
being organized themselves, right? So
Hmm.
do you take people that have just left the full-time workforce to be fractional, or do you try to work with fractional leaders who already have some experience working independently?
That's a good point, and I know this is not always the best answer, but it depends
Right.
because it's at the end of the day what you said right now makes a lot of sense. It's managing your efficiencies because one key differentiator of why somebody would hire you is for the agility and the adaptability, right? I mean, that's the whole point that they're going fractional. Otherwise, they
Mhm.
would go full time. So I think somebody who's had that wherewithal of wearing those hats, being scrappy, being kind of efficient at that stage is somebody who definitely, would find that success and that clients would like to work with because, the environment we're living in right now. I mean, the economy is doing its thing. Companies are adapting and evolving along with that. So I think more than ever now is the time for, both the talent as well as the startups to be agile in the best way possible. So yeah, to your point, I think there is a lot of merit in folks who can actually display that agility from previous work, even if they're starting out. I mean, just drawing up some plans of what that looks like from a execution standpoint.
100%. So when people think about the future and the freelancer market, the independent contractor market, I think the general population think that will kind of recall all of the different court cases around, drivers for Uber and Lyft and delivery people who, like, are they employees? Should they get benefits? Is being
Yeah.
a freelancer, independent contractor just a way for companies to, push benefit costs onto employees? And that would
Hmm.
sometimes make some people very, very worried,
Yeah.
those people standing on the sidelines. So, big picture, where do you think, where do you think the industry is going? And obviously, there's multiple industries,
Hmm.
but around, fractional versus full time hires.
Yeah, I think those are great concerns and very valid, but I think it's a trend that's already started, and we're now just seeing the kind of pillars coming into play in terms of those benefits. There are a lot of companies working in that space to give those additional benefits for independent contractors. So there's definitely a lot of progress that's happening on that front because I think more and more people are vigilant of those multiple income streams of working, even if they're doing their 9 to 5, they are kind of one eye on what do I do outside of work now so that I can eventually maybe jump ship and move on to that. So I think there's a lot of movement happening there for policies, for benefits in that space. But that being said, I think moving forward, it's something that I hope works because it helps hire non-local talent, which is maybe very efficient for the economy in general. We
Mhm.
have a lot of supplier diversity, things that kind of get met, your DEI initiatives, which a lot of companies want to focus on. So I think it has a lot of ripple effects, which can really impact the workforce. So, down the line, I think we'll see more and more of those systems coming into play for sure.
100%. I have worked with some companies that I have worked with one company that provides insurance and savings for
Mm-hmm.
contract workers, hourly employees that work in retail. So I know that is coming,
Yeah.
and we want to make sure everyone feels like they have some type of safety net. And
Yeah.
an additional point is, um, where you're focused on startups and scale ups. It's always been contractors, really.
Yeah.
Like you look at a pre-seed stage company, there might be two full-time employees and four contractors, right? So
Yes.
we're just developing and honing in the right type of talent to support growing new companies, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And just to add to that, I think when we talk about startups and scale ups, it's not also always tech. I mean, because having worked with some local organizations, the Small Business Expo and partners like that, there's a whole pool of companies that are in that middle segment, not just at the ideation or MVP stage and not Fortune 500, but who also, kind of fuel the economy and could benefit so much from a lot of these kind of talent sourcing options.
Right. 100%. I agree with you. So, our third and final segment, who needs a safety net? In this segment, I ask my guests to share, risks, failures, learning lessons of entrepreneurship and creating their own paths into the future. So recently, Sneha, you published an article encapsulating the interviews you've had with 50 women founders. And can you share your findings with us? Those three big learning lessons.
Absolutely. This is something that's very close to me. And like I said, Lindsay, I have followed your, kind of content on this from the early days. And some of those key lessons was, just focusing on the customer
Mhm.
because, very often you're distracted by building the perfect product, doing your, pitch deck so that you are always pitching to VCs and getting investor meetings going. But I think after having spoken to so many founders, that seemed to be like a common pattern and theme of, founder mistakes or lessons. Let's call them not mistakes that you learn along the way. So for me, for sure, the first one was, not going in it to be thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be making my next $1 million. I think
Mhm.
it's about who's one person you can impact, who's one person you can sell a service or a product to. And in our case, since it's a productized service, the way you're reaching out to them, the way you're targeting them, not by blitz scaling and
Yeah.
throwing a lot of money on advertising or marketing, but actually sitting down, talking to customers, understanding, what's the pain point you're solving. I think that is something most people maybe tend to forget and, not put on the front burner, whereas it should be the focus.
Yeah.
The second one would definitely be, again, going down the, VC route, glorifying fundraising. I think that is again an easy narrative to get caught up in because yeah, that's what you see. I mean, you scroll on any kind of tech, Twitter, LinkedIn. That's kind of what pops up. But you have to kind of be mindful of seeing that that's not the norm. I mean, there is way more behind the scenes that is not always highlighted. And I think for a lot of people, that bootstrapping path is something you just you kind of learn so much through, you grow so much through that. So that would be the second one that
So
you know
second is fundraising is not the goal.
yes,
Adding
exactly.
value to your customers, that's the
Yes,
goal.
that's the goal. Yeah,
Fundraising
and
is the goal. What's the third?
for sure. The third one is a sense just kind of being mindful of the ride along the way, and learning and picking up from where you lost, or just having those lessons up front, because it's something that is so tangible, and leaning into your own gut, because you'll get a lot of advice out there, you'll get a lot of knowledge out there. A lot of people have many things to share from their lessons, but every founder's journey is so different that you have to learn to lead from your gut. So it's not that somebody's going to come and tell you this is the solution for your problems, or this is how you should go to market.
Yeah.
You know your startup, your business the most. So I think it's about being mindful of that, and just doing those experiments, not hesitating to fail a little bit in those outreach, or doing something which you think didn't work and dialing back. So that would be the third one that I saw in a lot of founders sharing the same sentiment.
So let's go back to the first one. Don't do it for money. So we do hear in the glorification of tech CEOs or the glorification of entrepreneurs, the in the US, the American dream of building something huge and then sitting in your palace. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I have my own stories of seeing this, fail really quickly. I
Yeah.
worked with a co-founder to start my first business, which was a simple athleisure e-commerce store back in 2013 when athleisure was taking
Wow.
off, right? And we ended up not making it a full year working together because she had expectations of making our small investment back right away, and we sent
Mm-hmm.
one email to our friends and family to talk about the launch, and she didn't like the response she was personally offended by the friends not buying something right away,
Mm-hmm.
and that caused a lot of tension, and we ultimately had to say goodbye. I'm hiding some more of the co-founder drama. It definitely was more than that, but not for this episode. So, yeah, this idea that like you're going to quit your full time job and be making money, even enough to sustain yourself in the first
Mm-hmm.
year. It's like you kind of have to have the expectation that you won't, and if you
Yeah.
do, you're pleasantly surprised, right?
Yes. For
Yeah,
sure, for sure. I think there's a lot of thoughtful thinking and survivorship bias there, but I think the reality is sometimes very different. So it's humbling, and it's for me, it's been a journey of just personal learning, like discovery, understanding even things outside of the startup, right? So I mean, things like Medium and content writing just came up because it just felt natural to be leaning into that and sharing and documenting the journey along and meeting other people along the way, which I honestly, that was never something that I imagined happening. It was always, okay, how can I make the next dollar, or how can I sign the next contract? But sometimes you just have to take a step back and actually see that big picture. I know it sounds very cliched. And to add to that, I think when you're doing a lot of that groundwork of getting out of the building, going and talking to your customers. When I was starting out, this was a few years back when I was looking at a product in the education space. I actually went for, um, you know, kind of school tours to campuses in New York because I was like, that's where the students are. If I'm working with them, I'm going to talk to them there.
right.
Because distribution again is something we take for granted. We think we're going to make this product and
If
we're
you
going to
build
put it.
it, you will come. It's a core myth in my product market fit workshop is if you build it, they will come. Not true.
Not true, not true. I mean, whoever you're building for, there's got to be a way where you're going to meet them. How are they going to come across? I mean, think about it. When you go to the grocery store, when you come across a product online, how did it come in front of you? Like
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
a whole process that has been unfolded. So I think just realizing some of those things early on is key. At least that's what I'm learning and still learning as we go.
Right, right. Why you can't leave marketing until after you've built the product.
Yes.
But I do want to point out something like get out of the building, which the acronym is GOOB. Uh, that is a way of marketing because you have to go up to
Yeah.
people and introduce yourself and convince them to talk to you, right? And
Hmm.
you have to figure out where they are, to your point. And once you know where they are and you can engage with them, then as you get to know them and your product matures, you know
Hmm.
the places to go back to
Yeah.
do that marketing. So let's
And a lot of it is organic, right? I mean, a lot of it is you don't have to be spending millions of dollars on that because this
nope.
this way you're getting in front of them, you're getting feedback. So even if it's not working, you probably know why it's not working, as opposed to clicking a bunch of buttons and seeing, okay, this marketing campaign didn't perform. So yeah, for sure. I don't know there's an acronym, but yeah, Google makes sense.
Goob. I think I heard that term for the first time in like 2012 or something. So, the second one, fundraising is not the goal. I know this intimately. I've talked to so many founders about labs, product market fit for pre seed startups, and everyone says, I have to raise money. I can't do anything else unless I raise money. and they back themselves into a corner that they cannot get out of. So how does either a personal story or what you heard from the women founders you interviewed, what did you hear across the board as far as fundraising is not the goal?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of fundraising not being the goal for a lot of, founders, it was kind of a full-time job other than working on the startup. So to your point, what can you do until, because you're always fundraising, like that's the other narrative, right? That you're always building that case study. You're always, finding that next customer, doing those meetings just to stay in the loop. But if you're leaving the business aside just to do that, that's a big mistake. And I think from a lot of founders that I've spoken to, they would say, don't raise till you don't absolutely know why you need to raise. What is it? Is it really so crucial to your business that you won't be able to even, generate income or even go to market? But there's definitely something you can do on that,
Yeah.
first stage. Because very often, the relationship building on that front starts way before. So it's not, and again, going back to, women founder, the kind of environment you're in, what you're working on, is it in AI, is it not? Uh, there's a lot of things that you have to be mindful of, but I definitely think not making that like the core goal just reduces a lot of that stress. Because a mentor told me, and this was when we were in Techstars, that founders know that you get 100 no's and then you'll get a yes. Well, in sales too, you have to knock on many doors to sell. So,
Mhm.
that's itself the same concept, that you need to sell, and that'll just add more credibility to what you're doing. It gives you those case studies, maybe not 100 no's. And if it's 100 no's, then there's something that you need to take away or learn from that.
Right.
But it's kind of the same mindset. So treat it, like that job as well.
Yep. I always say if you focus on your customers and revenue, then the fundraising is easier. But if you focus on the fundraising, customers and revenue won't really come. So,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and then your third one was like thinking about distribution before building, this idea that
Hmm.
we should market before the product is ready. In my world, again, I try to uh, kill as many birds with one stone. So if it's customer research or getting a survey out the door and getting people to fill it out, these are all distribution. These are all
Yes.
opportunities to test your distribution, test your marketing, test your audience. So anything you want to share about thinking about distribution before building?
Yes, for sure. I think distribution is key, and like you said, there are so many touch points that you actually have with the customer, which you can take advantage of. Which I was not good at doing that early on. I mean, when I was building a very different product, a few years back, it was building that in stealth and in silo, and then taking it in front of the customer to see, hey, how do you think this works? Like, what do you think? Whereas this time around, it's all been about going to the drawing board with the customer, just kind of walking them through, this is kind of what I'm working on, these are the processes, what is your kind of thoughts or feedback on streamlining that. And I think it's saving so much more time, because even the people you're talking to, are they interested in even buying, or is it just somebody who's coming along for the ride just because you're asking them. We all have read the book The Mom Test, and I think that's one of the things that you learn there is exactly that. It's don't take that distribution for granted. There's many, many touch points you can have with the customer before you even have something to sell, which is good.
Yeah, 100%. I do think, and it's one of the ways I describe my work is to say that I help companies and founders design and sell the right product before spending any more money building the wrong one. Is and the way I developed the labs was really hyper focused on specifically non-technical founders, is like how far
Mhm.
they could push their idea into a fully formed business before hiring software
Mhm.
developers to do the work. Because I would
Mhm.
see people say, "Mm, I can't do anything. I can't do research without a product to show them. That's BS."
Mhm.
Then, and then that's like, well, I need money to build the product. And then they're like, well, now I need to fundraise. And it's like, well, no, very few investors are going to give you money to build a product. And there's actually a way for
Yeah.
you to get momentum with your customer base, even charge them for a few things along the
Mhm.
way in order to build your product. So I had one client who, in testing an MVP, just using a Squarespace and Eventbrite website, she made money in the first 4 to 6 weeks, right? And
Yes.
she thought she needed to hire a huge development team to build out a custom platform, and she could just use two readily available tools to start building traction amongst her audience,
Mhm.
you know.
For
So
sure. That's a great example. I was just going to say that, think back to like old school tech. I mean, Google Docs, like Word documents, I don't know, like simple Excel to manage your customers. But I think there's, like you said, there's so much. And with a lot of tools right now, no code, low code, those are such viable options, to even get a very, very scrappy version of your product in front of people, because it just saves a lot of time, and can iterate faster.
a lot of time and a lot of heartache.
Yes.
A lot of heartache. But again, at the end of the day, a lot of early stage founders, they don't know what they don't know. So they are gonna, I think, you said it yourself that you imagined yourself almost to be like a hero and an exception to the rule. And in a way, you have to feel a little bit about that to be an entrepreneur in the first place. But
Hmm.
there's combining that with humility too,
Yes.
right? So,
Yeah. It's always that fine balance of have that big vision, but know what you're doing today to move the needle.
yeah,
It's constantly a tug of war between those things for sure.
100%. I think I'm even in this right now, but that's again for another show. So let's make it make sense with Sneha Saigal. Fractional talent. Focus more on process than freelancers and contractors. Easy way for startups and scale ups to access expertise at a budget that they can afford. Is that right? Did I get it right?
Absolutely. That's where, yeah.
Cool. So thank you for listening to Make Sense with me, your host, Lindsay Tabus, and my guest, Sneha Saigal. We hope you enjoyed our take on fractional talent and the future of work. Sneha, where can people find you online?
Yeah, this has been great, Lindsay. Thank you. Happy to connect with people. I'm on LinkedIn. The name is Sneha Saigal, and you can also, check out our website at geeksandexperts.com. Happy to chat with anybody who's, interested in the future of work, or just even founder to founder. I'm always happy to do those those calls as well. So feel free to reach out.
Yep. As always, you can check out all the links and resources in the show notes, but I have one final note. If you want to continue to be the smartest person in the room, make sure you're getting notified when each episode hits. So on YouTube, hit the subscribe for next week's episode, and for audio only, follow wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you, Sneha, for joining me.
Thank you so much. Take care.